Good evening. I'm Chris Matthews in Washington, where it was a day of high drama at the Capitol. At this hour, we're awaiting a Senate vote on the Republican tax bill that could come at any time. The House voted this afternoon, passing the bill despite every Democrat opposing it, along with 12 Republicans. Well, late today, there was a wrinkle. House Republicans said they will slightly alter the bill and re-vote tomorrow to ensure it fits with Senate rules that allow it to pass with a simple majority. The Senate parliamentarian had rejected several provisions snuck into the bill that aren't budget related. They included, catch this, something on homeschooling from Ted Cruz and a tax benefit for a college. Guess where? In Mitch McConnell's home state of Kentucky, earmarked just for that college. Well, despite those snags, it is expected to pass the Senate tonight. The tax bill slashes corporate tax rates. It also cuts individual tax rates, though the wealthiest will disproportionately benefit. Today, Republicans celebrated what amounts to the most sweeping tax overhaul in a generation.
My colleagues, this is a day I've been looking forward to for a long time. We are about to achieve some really big things. Things that the cynics have scoffed at for years, decades even. Today, we are giving the people of this country their money back. This is their money after all.
How big of a deal do you think today is for Republicans voting on tax?
Oh, I think it's gigantic. We think it's a really big deal. We think it's the right thing for the country. It'll speed up growth. It'll create jobs and opportunity, and it'll lower the tax burden on the American people. Those are all great things.
And this bill is deeply unpopular. Are you sure that this is going to translate into a political win?
A total winner.
And it is about cutting taxes for the American people, and indeed this bill does that. I feel very comfortable with that, and it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it will be a historic day for Americans from coast to coast.
Well, this morning, the president tweeted, stocks in the economy have a long way to go after the tax cut bill is totally understood and appreciated in scope and size. Immediate expensing will have a big impact. Biggest tax cuts and reform ever passed. Enjoy and create many beautiful jobs. That's Trump talking. Independent analysts say the wealthiest Americans will benefit the most from this bill. According to the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center, if you're making under $25,000 a year, you get about a $60 tax cut, $60. For middle-class Americans, the average tax cut comes to just under $1,000. But if you're one in the top 1%, making over $730,000, you're getting an average of $51,000 back, with a lot more at the top. All in, 65% of the bill's benefits would go to the top 20% of earners in 2018. And it's worse when the bill's temporary tax cuts expire. According to Vox, by 2017, more than half of all Americans, 53%, would pay more in taxes, and nearly 83% of the bill's benefit would go to the top 1%. For more on a dramatic day in Washington, I'm joined by Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado, Washington Post columnist Catherine Rampell, and Republican National Committee Chair Michael Steele. Thank you very much for this. Well, are the Democrats, what is the feeling on the House, on the Senate side, Senator? Are they feeling, my God, the Republicans are putting their head into the lion's mouth here? Why do they want to be hated by 99% of the country to benefit 1%?
I think the feeling, you heard Paul Ryan say that he's been waiting for this for a long time. I think we all think he's been waiting it from the first time he ever read Atlas Shrugged, and that's what he's trying to put in place.
So it's ideology.
It's totally ideology. It's a bill, we could have had a bipartisan bill that lowered the corporate rate maybe to 25, cleared out some loopholes, increased the earned income tax credit or the child tax credit, and spent some money on infrastructure. That could have gotten 70 or 80 votes. Tonight, instead, we're passing a bill that's a radical Republican bill that bears no relationship between what their description of it is and what the president's description of it is and what's actually in the bill.
Catherine, you've written beautifully on this. Tell us about this bill, because it really is a shift of wealth to the top, as if the wealth at the top was any, needier than anybody. What do you make of the fact that that seems to be shrouded in the way that Trump's people understand this so far?
Yes, it's bizarre in that almost every talking point that Republicans have made about this legislation is false, right? It's not going to primarily benefit the middle class. It's not going to raise taxes on the rich. It's not going to pay for itself. It's not going to supercharge growth, and so on. So the question becomes, if, in fact, this is such a great idea, why not sell it on the merits? Why not say, you know what, we think that rich people deserve to have fatter paychecks, deserve to be able to keep more of their investment earnings, their passive income, and just sell it on those measures alone. And instead, they're just trying to hoodwink America. I think because Americans are following this bill more closely than they might have otherwise, they are learning that a lot of these talking points are false. In fact, possibly all of them are false, and that's part of the reason they don't like the legislation.
Well, the polls show the Republican tax bill is extremely unpopular in the country. The brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll out tonight shows 41% disapprove, only 24%, less than a quarter, like this bill. A Monmouth poll this week shows an even bigger gap, 47% approve, while 26% disapprove. And a CNN poll, I think that's wrong, more than half would say they oppose the bill. I think that other one's wrong, the middle one. Those were opposed as well. Look at that, disapprove 47, approve 26. So all three polls, Michael, say that your party's tax bill is against their interests.
Yeah, and that's a problem. And I don't know how you go out to the country, to middle America, and make the case when middle America, because remember, particularly with the last poll, 55%, that includes Republicans. That's not just Democrats and independents in that number. So clearly there are enough people out there, to the senator's point, who have been paying attention to this and trying to decide whether or not this does exactly what the leadership says it does for me. And their conclusion so far is it does not. Okay. And I think that's going to be a problem when it comes to selling the bill.
Here's the problem I have. I grew up with Republican parents who were moderate Republicans, cloth coat Republicans. They weren't well off. And they didn't benefit from this Republican bounty for the very rich. Why do regular Republicans who are not rich, including the rural people who voted for Trump, cheering for a tax cut, which goes to people they'll never meet in their lives and maybe see in a movie somewhere or hear about on Wall Street? They'll never meet these people. Why do they say, great work, Donald Trump, keep giving money to the top 1% of 1% people? I will never be invited to their homes, never meet them on the street because they're not on the street. Why do they vote this way?
Well, explain. I can't tell. I'm not sure I can explain that. I can tell you that, consistent with your polling, the Republicans in Colorado, a lot of them hate this bill.
Yeah,
and
but they're still going to vote for Trump.
Yeah, maybe not again, because what he's saying is completely conflicts what he said on the campaign trail. Let me give you one example that I'll bet your mom and dad would have driven them crazy. In this bill, the top 572,000 households, these are people that make more than $1 million,
right,
they're getting $37 billion in this bill, year after year after year. And we're not paying for it. We're borrowing that money. So your parents would look at that and say, wait a minute.
Well, where's the fiscal responsibility of the Republican Party?
Right.
Because since I was born, I heard the good thing about the Republican Party was that it looked out for the deficit. It wasn't crazy in spending. And the Democrats were the bad guys. They didn't care about the deficit. Explain.
Well, look, I was on the campaign trail for almost 18 months in 2009 and 10, talking about that very point, finding out there a lot of people who wanted to come to Congress on that very point to cut the nation's debt, to cut the nation's deficit spending. Remember the language. We're going to come to Washington and not spend $1 more than we take in. We're not going to put a further burden on the backs of our kids and grandkids. And yet this is what this bill does. Now, they have this little trigger in here. They're saying in year 2025, when all these great tax cuts that middle class is getting goes away, that future Congress
after they get the votes of people
is going to say, oh well, no, we're going to make it permanent. Well, that's going to add further money to the nation's debt.
Well, I know. It's Billy Bob Thornton is now in the White House. Bad Santa has taken over. Donald Trump running. Go ahead.
I was going to say, remember, you were asking about, don't Republicans care about deficits? I mean, this goes back more than 30 years, the idea of the two Santa Clauses, right? Democrats were the Santa Claus for spending, giving out goodies to their constituents through the spending side, and Republicans were the Santa Claus of tax cuts. Both parties had their own form of giveaways to their own constituents.
Except for one modest difference. Democrats' idea of a goodie was health care for kids. They couldn't be protected, they didn't get health care. It's called CHIPS, and that's a program the Republicans are trying to kill.
And if you add up $1.4 trillion, which is the projected deficit here, that represents a huge amount of money if you were going to deficit spend that you could spend on, treating people for opioids when we're losing 50,000 people a year, Americans. You could fully train the 1,100 pilots at the Air Force.
How about trains that can go over 35 miles an hour?
Trains that go over 35. How about
that'd be a start.
How about taking
can blame the engineer, but the trains ought to be able to go faster than 35 miles an hour.
And the roads and bridges that your mom and dad and my parents built for us.
Well, Donald, our pioneer parents, I think, way back. I don't know if I have any pioneers.
They're not that far back.
Immigrants from Ireland or somewhere. Anyway, Donald Trump ran as a populist, promising to fight for the forgotten man. Let's watch.
We are fighting for every American who believes government should serve the people, not the donors and not the special interests.
I want to save the middle class. You know, the middle class, the hedge funds guys didn't build this country. These are guys that shift paper around and they get lucky. The hedge fund guys are getting away with murder. They're making a tremendous amount of money. They have to pay tax. I want to lower the rates for the middle class.
I will never stop fighting for you against the Washington establishment. I'm an outsider fighting for you. That's what I'm doing. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
Tax reform will protect low-income and middle-income households, not the wealthy and well-connected. They can call me all they want. It's not going to help. I'm doing the right thing, and it's not good for me, believe me.
Catherine, you write a column and you have to write the truth. How does a guy get away by telling the not truth? I mean, everything he said there, I'm going after Wall Street, carried interest are completely protected here. Everything's about the top, reducing it from 39.6 down to 37. Huge amounts of money at the top, bringing the corporate rate down from 35 to 21, basically getting rid of the estate tax altogether. I mean, getting rid of the alternate minimum or minimal tax that made companies pay at least something, at least 21% or 21%, and now everything he promised, he lied about. I shouldn't say lied. He mispromised about. And he's going the opposite direction, and the people are still cheering him. The people that were promised what he's not doing are cheering that he's not doing it. Why are they cheering?
Why are they cheering? I think it's more of a performative thing. It's an expressive thing. They feel like his demeanor, his affect is simpatico, right, with them, with his voters. It doesn't really matter what he does. It doesn't matter what his policy actually looks like. And it's not only on taxes, right? I mean, if you want to talk about ways in which he has forsaken the forgotten man, he has again forgotten the forgotten man. It's on kneecapping the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's on rolling back protections for students who have been defrauded on student loans. It's on rolling back protections for people who might get black lung for crying out loud. You know, he's supposed to be looking out for coal miners, and even in that case, he's deregulating. So there are so many policy frontiers on which he has let down his public. But you know what? These policies are complicated. And beyond that, again, I think that they just feel like he gets them, he speaks for them. They don't really care what he actually does in office, so long as he makes liberals angry, and
but he does not only make liberals angry. I'm talking about me here, but he also makes your crowd, Michael, your crowd.
Yeah.
You take this, right?
Yeah.
Why does every darn Republican in the Senate say yes, sir? Because if they have a different value system than Trump.
Well, because they look back at their states and they see where the president is polling in their neighborhoods that they've got to go to over the Christmas break and next year in campaign. And right now, despite everything else that we may think and feel about what's good, bad, or ugly about this bill, those members know that is polling 60%, 70% back in their states, or in their districts it could be higher. So that's a political pressure that's been brought to bear for a lot of these members as well, which makes this much harder for them. If the pressure back at home was a lot less, if the numbers at home reflected what the national number is for Trump at 30-some%, trust me, this would not be the bill you would say.
Okay, I don't trust him. Let me ask you something. It seems to me,
you gotta
trust
me.
The bill is to give money to the rich who will give him back money to run TV. Come 18 and come 20. They'll pay for all the ads to tell the regular people that he's on their side. In other words, the money will come from the people he gave to in the big tax cut, and the money will be used to bamboozle the regular people. It seems like a perfect little system that works for Trump.
And it has worked. And for some reason, whenever he's out there telling his tales, like he was in Missouri the other day, he gets away with it. I think the rest of us need to be explaining what's actually in this bill. And somebody asked me the other day, well, how could these guys vote against it? I think, Michael, your explanation is a very good one. I'm looking forward to going back to counties in Colorado where the president won 70 and 80% and explaining to them why I voted against this bill. In fact, I'd like to be able to go back and say I voted twice against this bill because it is so inconsistent with the fundamental promises that he made during his.
Well, I hope your leadership, like Schumer and Pelosi, get the word out that this is a bank robbery of the average person. But we see anyway. Thank you. Nuance isn't important here. This is the time for populist Democrats to make their noise. Senator Michael Bennet, I don't have to teach you guys. Sometimes I think I do. Michael Steele and Catherine Rampell, beautiful columns. Thank you. Coming up, what's going to